Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kiali community meeting for Sprint 77. We're going to talk about what we did this sprint, and this is the version 1.55 of Kiali. So we'll talk a bit about some of the things that are going into this sprint, some of what we worked on, and then give you a preview for what's going into the next sprint. And then there'll be a community discussion where anyone is welcome to bring any topic about the project, about Kiali, or any questions you might have. So let's get going. So this sprint, we finished 35 issues. There's a few in progress still and a few queued up on the backlog. As a highlight, here's some of the things that we worked on. This was something that was worked on in the previous sprint, but it carried over to this sprint, and it'll probably land the next one. But it's adding more details to the overview page, so giving you more details on the control plane itself and what's going on with your control plane on the overview cards. So this will be helpful in getting a high-level overview with what's going on with your control plane from the overview page. And then another feature that was added was management of traffic routing in the graph. Edgar, are you here? You want to talk about this? If not, I can briefly talk about it. Edgar may not be here, but so what this does is it gives you the ability to take actions on the graph from the graph nodes themselves. So if you see from the screenshot here, what's highlighted on the left is you've gone in and clicked on a node or a namespace, and a context menu pops up whenever you do that. Before, it was just read-only information or links that would take you to see more details about the node. If it's a service node, you could jump to more details about the service. So this feature would actually let you open up some of the Kiali wizards in order to add routing to that particular service or add fault injection, that kind of thing. So it puts the action closer to the graph and makes the graph more interactive. So you'll see that both on the graph nodes themselves and also in the side panel there. So if you click on the kebab, you'll see additional options there that weren't there before to create some of the routing scenarios that you see. So that's a nice feature, and it just helps put the actions closer to the graph itself. So if you want to experiment with adding fault injection, let's say for a particular service, you can just do that straight from the graph itself. Another feature that was added, we made an improvement on the back end. So we optimized the way that the graph generation was being done, which for some mesh topologies results in about a 25 to 30% faster graph loading. So that should be good for especially larger amounts of workloads. This is tested with about 150, 200 workloads across a few different namespaces. So it will result in faster graph loading times and less requests into Prometheus, which will hopefully be less load on your Prometheus server as a result of all that. And this was another feature that was added with Istio config list loading. Heike, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Actually, as we did some optimization of loading Istio config from the Istio registry, which makes faster than directly querying to Kubernetes API. So there was a change in the call from UI to backend. So now it is making less calls to the backend and loading the Istio config list together with the validations, which are also generated from the configs loaded from the Istio registry. And this information is shown on Istio config list with less calls to the backend. Also, it is filtering some internal resources which are available in the registry, and those resources are marked as read-only when clicking to the details of these configurations. Yeah, and a couple of community issues were fixed there. That's it. Thank you. Nick?
Thanks a lot, Heike. And continuing on with the scalability theme, there is some work done on metric thinning. Jay, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thanks, Nick. So, yeah, you can see the theme here, right? Scalability, 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 and that's been true for really many of the sprints. If you've been following the series of what's been going on in Kiali, right? So as Istio has stabilized and more people are deploying larger meshes, we are trying hard to make Kiali handle that scale. And one of the things that's happened as people have grown their installations or their meshes, they're generating more and more telemetry, right? So the proxies for every request are generating really a lot of information into Prometheus, both from the source proxy reporting and the destination proxy reporting and so forth. And that has led to people having to increase the resources and management of the Prometheus instance. So what we wanted to do is help people manage that increased load of telemetry, especially if you're just using the telemetry for or to support Kiali's operation, right? So in this release, we're going to have new documentation on Kiali.io. There's a section under the configuration section and then under Prometheus called metric thinning. And if you follow these directions and apply the configuration to your Prometheus config, you can basically stop the ingestion of most metrics that Kiali doesn't need. Just doing that can reduce, in our test, has shown about a 20% metric reduction. But anyone who's really familiar with what's going on with metric generation, they realize that it's the Prometheus histograms, which are the largest consumer of Prometheus resources and generate the highest cardinality of time series. But the histograms are very valuable. So it's kind of a balancing act of how you want to handle things. Histograms handle things like your response times that are reported in Kiali and your request bytes and your response bytes. So your throughputs of bytes on your requests and so forth, both in request and response directions. And being able to show that with percentiles and so forth. This happens in the graph edges, this happens in the metric charts and so forth. But if you can identify that you don't need some of that information, or you want to just, you absolutely have to reduce the amount of telemetry that you're generating, we've also showed you how you can reduce the histogram telemetry, which will cripple Kiali, but if you're not using those features, it could be a really large savings for you. So we also document how to do that, and we've added code that will disable options that are no longer supported by what you've stopped collecting, basically. So for example, if you were to not need percentile reporting on request byte throughput, and you stopped ingesting that into Prometheus, those options in the charts would be grayed out so that you're not going to get yourself into trouble, and it's a little bit more clear what is and isn't supported by the back-end telemetry. So that is where we're at. We're continuing to look at things like this going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay, and thanks for the community input that we've had on this too. That's been helpful in knowing what to focus on and the approach to take with this. So some other issues that I'll just briefly summarize that we're taking care of. a lot of these were bug fixes and bug fixes that members of the community reported. So it's something that we actively monitor and try to fix every sprint. So if there's an issue or you're having trouble with something in Kiali, feel free to open up an issue, and we're pretty proactive about fixing them. So some of the bug fixes you see here, in addition to some CI flakes that were fixed, expanding Cypress coverage, adding new documentation for how to set up your development environment in Kiali.0 if you want to work on the Kiali project itself. There's some highlights there. All right, so that's for what went into Kiali version 1.55. Here's a preview of some of the things we're going to be working on for version 1.56. Just as a reminder, we release a new Kiali version every 3 weeks. That's our sprint cadence. So the next sprint will be for version 1.56. This is just kind of a high-level overview of some of the things that we'll be working on. If you want to see more in depth what this is, you can go to the Kiali project, the Kiali organization and GitHub, and just filter by backlog. You can take a look there at some of the things that we've got teed up for the next sprint. And here are just some more of those issues that are in the backlog. All right, that may have been a fast blaze through the community meeting, but we're to the discussion part of it. So if anyone has any topics, this is an open discussion. We'll stop the recording and open the floor up for discussion. So thanks, everyone.